Over the past month, this channel ran one brand through more scrutiny than almost anything else we've covered: Sire. It started with a simple question: why is everyone suddenly buying this one base brand? And it did not end there. Your comments forced a second investigation into a flaw nobody else was reviewing. A third video checked whether the company actually fixed what got criticized. And a fourth followed a completely different flaw on a completely different model to one of the most satisfying quiet fixes we found in this hobby. This is the complete Sire investigation, all 4 episodes back to back, exactly as they happen. One honest note before we start: nobody paid for any of this, and every claim in every chapter below is linked and sourced in the description. Chapter 1. Why is everyone actually buying Sire? Walk into any base forum, any gear group, any comment section on this channel, and ask one simple question: what should I buy for $500 or less? Then start counting. Within 10 answers, one word will appear more often than Fender, more often than Ibanez, more often than any brand that has been building basses since your grandfather's time. Sire, a company most players had never heard of 10 years ago, is now the default answer of the entire budget bass internet, and the used listings tell the same story. Sire basses sell in days, while famous badges sit for months. So today we are answering the question properly, with receipts. Why is everyone buying Sire? Is it actually that good, or are we all just repeating each other? And most importantly, where is the catch? Because there is always a catch. Here is the plan for the next 20 minutes. First, the origin story, because Sire's rise makes no sense until you know about the deal between an unknown Asian factory brand and one of the greatest bass players who ever lived, and what he demanded before putting his name on anything. Second, what you actually get for the money, model by model, from the $300 V3 to the 5-string monsters. Because Sire is not one bass, it is a system, and most buying mistakes happen because people pick the wrong letter. Third, the uncomfortable question nobody asked in the hype threads: how is this stuff so cheap? What is actually being traded away? And fourth, the catch, the real documented weaknesses: who should absolutely buy a Sire, and who should walk past the hype and buy something else entirely. Stay with me for part 4 especially, because that is where the honest answer lives. And one of the 3 catches I'm going to show you is something the fan forums almost never mention out loud. And pay attention to part 1, because the single design decision Marcus Miller forced into these basses is the actual reason your favorite YouTube demo sounds the way it does. And once you hear what it is, you will understand the entire brand in one sentence. A quick honest note before we start: Sire did not pay for this video, nobody sent us anything, and the links below are plain product links so you can compare prices yourself. No markup, no affiliate games. But I did build something for you: the complete buyer's guide, every gold mine and money trap from this channel as one honest map you can take shopping. That's in the description too. Now let's get into it. Part 1, the deal that built the brand. To understand Sire, you need to understand what the budget bass market looked like before 2015. If you had $300, you bought an entry-level instrument from a famous brand, and everyone understood the deal. Decent wood, cheap electronics, tuners that did the job, and a silent agreement that the good stuff, the real preamps, the real finishing work, the real attention, started 3 price tiers higher. The industry was comfortable. Nobody was in a hurry to change it. Then a South Korean company called Sire, backed by large-scale Asian manufacturing, did something unusual. Instead of hiring a marketing agency, they went to Marcus Miller. And if that name only vaguely rings a bell, Marcus Miller is not a YouTube influencer. He is one of the most recorded bass players in history. The slap sound behind decades of records. A man whose signature Fender jazz bass was already legendary. The pitch was simple: help us build basses, and we will sell them at prices working people can afford. And Miller, by every account of the story, made demands that sounded insane for the price bracket. He wanted a real, powerful, active preamp, not a token tone knob. He wanted playability details that normally live on instruments costing 4 figures, rolled fretboard edges, proper fretwork, necks you could actually live on. And he wanted it at prices where a student, a weekend player, a parent buying a first serious instrument could reach it. The result was the Marcus Miller V7 and its little siblings, and the market reaction was slow, then sudden. Because here is what happened. Players bought them expecting the usual budget compromise, plugged them in, and found an 18-volt preamp with a genuine 3-band equalizer, a mid-control that could reshape the entire voice of the instrument, on a bass that cost less than a weekend trip. The reviews wrote themselves. The forums did the advertising for free. And that is the one-sentence explanation of the entire brand I promised you. Sire took the features the industry reserved for the expensive shelf and put them on the cheap shelf and let word of mouth do the rest. Part 2. The system and how to read it. Sire's naming looks like alphabet soup until someone explains it. So here is the 2-minute version that saves you from buying the wrong bass. The letter is the family. V means the classic jazz bass recipe, the slim neck, the 2 single coils, the sound that sits in every funk, soul, and pop record you love. P means the precision style recipe, the thicker, rounder, foundational thump. M means the modern soap bar sound, more hi-fi, more aggressive. Z is the newest family, their take on the stingray-style humbucker growl. And U means short scale, the smaller, punchier, easier instrument we have praised on this channel before. The number is the trim level, and this is where Sire got genuinely clever. The V3 is the entry door, usually around $300, and we called it a goldmine on this channel long before this video. Real active preamp, slim, fast neck, the Miller design language, at a price where its competitors offer you a volume knob and good wishes. The V5 drops the active circuit and leans into a pure passive vintage recipe, and there is a serious argument, which the comments section is welcome to fight about, that the V5 is the best pure value in the entire catalog. Fewer electronics to pay for, all of the build quality, and a classic sound that never goes out of style. The V7 is the famous one, the flagship of the affordable line. Better woods, the full second-generation Marcus preamp, the one the reviews rave about. And above that, the V8s and V10s climb toward genuinely premium territory while still undercutting the big names by embarrassing margins. 2 details deserve special attention because they are the details owners always mention. First, the rolled fretboard edges. On most budget basses, the edge of the fretboard is a square corner because rounding it costs factory time, and factory time costs money. Sire rounds it anyway, and the result is a neck that feels played in and expensive the moment you pick it up. It is a $2 detail that creates a $2,000 first impression, and it is the single most quoted reason people say a Sire feels like it costs more than it does. Second, the heritage preamp. The 3-band EQ with sweepable character does not just adjust the tone, it convincingly imitates the tonal range of instruments far above its class. And that is precisely the feature that makes every demo sound so impressive. The bass can chase almost any reference sound the demoer throws at it. Part 3. The uncomfortable question, how is it this cheap? Because let's be adults about this. A bass with premium features at a third of the premium price is not magic. It is a set of decisions, and you deserve to know what they are. Decision 1. Manufacturing location. Sire builds in large modern factories in Indonesia and China, the same industrial ecosystem we covered in our factories video. World-class CNC work, experienced workforces, and labor costs that make the math work. That is not a scandal. It is the same ecosystem that builds mid-range instruments for nearly every famous brand you can name. Decision 2. Marketing spend or the lack of it. Sire spends almost nothing on traditional advertising. No stadium sponsorships, no full-page magazine campaigns. The Marcus Miller name and 10 years of forum evangelism are the marketing department. When you buy a legacy brand's budget instrument, part of your money funds the brand machine. When you buy a Sire, that line item mostly is not there. Decision 3. Direct value engineering. Money goes where hands touch and ears hear, necks, frets, preamps, and get saved where they do not. Simpler finishes on lower models, hardware that is solid but not boutique, packaging, dealer margins. It is the same philosophy this channel preaches every single week, applied by a manufacturer. That is honestly why this channel and this brand keep crossing paths. They are running our playbook at industrial scale. And now part 4, the catch. Because if you only listen to the fan threads, Sire has no flaws. And whenever the internet agrees that something has no flaws, this channel gets suspicious. There are 3 real catches, and you should know all of them before you click buy. Catch 1, quality control variance. When you build enormous volumes at aggressive prices, the tolerances are honest, but the outliers exist. The forums document it fairly. Most Sires arrive excellent. Some arrive with sharp fret ends in dry seasons, high frets, or setups that need real work before the bass shows its potential. The same variance exists at every budget brand, but Sire's hype makes people expect perfection, and statistics do not care about hype. The fix is the same one we teach in every episode. Budget $40 to $60 for a proper setup, or learn to do it yourself, and the outlier problem mostly disappears. Catch 2, weight and consistency lottery. Sire bodies, especially the ash ones on certain V models, can vary noticeably in weight from instrument to instrument. Order online and you might get the 9-pound version or the 11-pound version of the same bass, and your shoulder will know the difference on a 3-hour rehearsal. If weight matters to you, buy from sellers who list actual weights or accept the lottery knowingly. And catch 3, the one the fan forums rarely say out loud: resale value. Sire's greatest strength, relentless value at retail, is exactly what caps the used price. Nobody pays strong money for a used Sire when a new one is affordable and always in stock. If you buy new and keep it for years, irrelevant. But if you are the type who cycles gear every 18 months, understand that a Sire is a bass you buy to play, not a bass you buy to park money in. On this channel, we would argue that was always the point of a musical instrument. But you deserve the whole truth, not the highlight reel. So who should actually buy one? Let's make it concrete, because the honest answer is not everyone. If you are a beginner with $300 who wants one bass that can grow with you for a decade, the V3 remains one of the 2 or 3 smartest purchases in the entire market, and we said that before this video and we'll keep saying it after. If you love classic passive simplicity and want maximum instrument per dollar, look hard at the V5. It might quietly be the best deal in the catalog. If you want the full famous experience, the one the demos are about, the V7 is the flagship of the affordable line for a reason. If you want the Stingray-style growl without the Stingray-style invoice, the Z3 is the newest goldmine, and the wider market is only beginning to notice it. And if smaller scale suits your hands or your style, the U5 short scale carries everything good about the brand into a friendlier format. And who should walk past the hype? 3 groups, honestly. Players who need guaranteed dead-on setup out of the box and will not touch a truss rod, because the QC lottery will eventually find you, and your local shop's setup bench is part of the real price. Players who flip gear constantly because the resale math genuinely is not in your favor. And players who already own a good instrument and are being seduced by demos into thinking a Sire will fix their tone. Because, and longtime viewers can say it with me, your tone lives in your hands, your strings, your setup, and your amp. A new bass is the 5th item on that list, no matter whose name is on the headstock. Before we wrap up, run Sire through the 3 questions from the buyer's guide, because the framework matters more than any single brand. Question 1. Can you hear the problem you are solving? If your current bass genuinely cannot make the sounds you need, a Sire with that preamp is a legitimate, hearable upgrade. If you just watched a demo and felt the itch, that is a feeling, not a fault. Question 2. Real fault or sold feeling? Sire's marketing is quiet, but hype is hype, whether it comes from a company or a comment section. And 10,000 forum posts can sell a feeling as effectively as any ad campaign. Question 3. Have you done the cheap things first? $100 of strings and setup on your current bass buys a shocking percentage of what a new instrument promises. If you have done all that and the answer is still yes, then yes, buy the Sire, enjoy it, and play it for 10 years. Now, before the verdict, let's do what the hype threads never do and put Sire next to its actual competition, price bracket by price bracket, because a recommendation without alternatives is just an advertisement. At $300, the V3 fights the Ibanez GSR 200 and the Yamaha TRB 304, and here is the honest split. The Ibanez gives you the thinnest, fastest neck in the class and the lightest body. The Yamaha gives you the most reliably consistent build of the three, and the Sire gives you by far the most powerful electronics and the most expensive feel. If you play fast rock and want comfort, the Ibanez case is real. If you want a tank that never surprises you, Yamaha earns its reputation. If you want the widest range of sounds and a neck that feels like it came off a dearer instrument, that is the V3's fight to lose, and it usually wins it. One bracket up, around 400 to 500, the V7 walks straight into Fender territory, and this comparison genuinely upsets people. The Mexican-made Player Series Fender gives you the name, the resale value, and the dealer network on every corner. And the V7 gives you objectively more instrument, more electronics, more finishing detail, more range. Which one is right depends on what you are actually buying. An instrument or an instrument plus a badge plus an exit strategy, both are legitimate purchases. Only one of them is honest about what the extra money buys. And in the Stingray conversation, the Z3 against Sterling's own Sub-Ray 4, which we recommended in our Goldmines episode, the Sterling is the licensed original recipe and still a great buy, but the Z3 brings the bigger electronics package and the fancier construction details to the same money, and this may be the first bracket where Sire is not the underdog, but the favorite. One more thing the demos never show you: the first 100 days of actually owning one. Here is the realistic timeline, assembled from hundreds of ownership reports. Day 1. The neck feels more expensive than the price. The preamp is overwhelming in the best way, and you will spend an evening just turning the mid-knob and grinning. Week 1. You discover the setup is either excellent or clearly needs the work we talked about. There is not much middle ground, and this is the moment the lottery reveals your ticket. Month 1. The honeymoon settles, and this is where Sires distinguish themselves from most budget basses, because familiarity usually makes cheap instruments feel cheaper, and the consensus among owners is that the Sire keeps feeling like more than you paid. Month 3. You either barely think about the bass anymore because it simply works, which is the highest compliment an instrument can earn, or you have joined the modding forums and turned it into a platform, which the V-Series takes to beautifully. Either way, the pattern in long-term reports is remarkably consistent. The complaints cluster in week 1 and the praise clusters in month 3, which is close to the exact opposite of how hyped budget gear usually ages. And that, more than any demo, is the statistic that convinced this channel to take the brand seriously. So here is the whole honest answer to the title. Why is everyone buying Sire? Because 10 years ago, a legend in a factory called the Budget Market's Bluff put expensive features on cheap instruments, spent the marketing budget on fretwork instead of full-page ads, and let the internet do the rest. The hype is real, and the hype is mostly deserved, and the catches, QC variants, the weight lottery, soft resale are real too. And knowing them is the difference between a happy owner and a disappointed one. Buy the bass, not the thread consensus. Buy it for reasons your own ears and hands can verify. That is the whole philosophy of this channel, and Sire just happens to be the rare brand that mostly survives it. Tell me in the comments, do you own a Sire? Which letter and number? And be honest, was yours a lottery winner, or did it need work out of the box? And if you chose something else over a Sire at the same price, what was it and why? Drop it below, because the honest ownership reports in this comment section are worth more than every demo on this platform. Everything is linked in the description, including the buyer's guide with the complete map of gold mines and money traps. Subscribe for honest, no-hype truth about bass gear, and I would be genuinely glad to have you along for the ride. That first video blew up, And the comment section did something this channel has learned to take seriously. It argued with itself. Dozens of owners love their Sire Basses. A smaller, quieter group kept describing the exact same problem, unprompted, independently, on a part of the base nobody reviews closely enough. That disagreement became its own investigation. Chapter 2. The Sire Problem Nobody Reviews. 2 weeks ago, we asked a simple question on this channel. Why is everyone buying Sire? Thousands of you watched, and the comment section filled up with ownership reports, which is exactly what we asked for. But inside those comments, one theme kept coming back. A theme that almost no review on this platform ever talks about. One of you, a working bassist who gigs 2 to 3 times every week, wrote that his V7 preamp died within a year. He replaced the bass with a V3, and that preamp died too. Another of you called the battery compartment nearly impossible to open and said the words every fan thread avoids. Sire preamps have known issues. And a third viewer, who owns a V7, a V8, a ZES3, and a P5R, admitted something remarkable. He gigs his active Sires in passive mode permanently because he likes them better that way. So today we are doing what the demos will not do. We are talking about the famous Sire preamp as it behaves in the real world, not in a shop. What actually goes wrong, how often, what it costs you, and, most importantly, the 3 basses in Sire's own catalog that dodge the problem completely, including one that your comments seem to love more than any review I have ever seen. Here is the plan. Part 1. The Promise. What the Marcus Heritage preamp actually is, why it made the brand famous, and why every demo you have ever watched leans on it. Part 2. The Problem. The documented failure patterns, the battery economics nobody explains to beginners, and the honest statistics question. Is this a real defect pattern or just the internet being the internet? Part 3. The Passive Escape. 3 current Sire models with no preamp at all, same necks, same build quality, nothing to die on a Saturday night. And Part 4. If you already own an active Sire, the 3-step insurance plan that costs almost nothing and means a dead preamp will never end a gig for you. And stay for Part 3 even if you love active basses, because the middle bass of those 3 is the one your own comments crowned king, a model that has never had a famous review, barely appears in demos, and might quietly be the best instrument Sire builds. A quick honest note before we start. Sire did not pay for this video, nobody sent us anything, and the links below are plain product links with no affiliate games. This video will also criticize a product we recommended 2 weeks ago with the same face. That is the whole point of this channel. And because buying right is a method, not a list, I built the complete buyer's guide, every goldmine and money trap from this channel as one honest map. It is linked in the description. Now let's get into it. Part 1. The Promise. To be fair to Sire, we have to start with why this preamp made them famous. The Marcus Heritage 3 is an 18-volt active circuit running on 2 9-volt batteries, and that voltage number matters. Double the headroom of the typical 9-volt budget preamp means the sound stays clean and huge even when you dig in hard. You get a 3-band equalizer, bass, middle, and treble, and the middle band is sweepable, meaning you can choose which frequencies you are boosting or cutting. On a bass that costs $400, that is a recording studio channel strip bolted onto your instrument. It is the reason a Sire demo can chase the sound of a vintage jazz bass, a modern funk machine, and a pick-driven rock bass inside the same video. When that circuit works, and to be clear, for most owners it works for years, it is the best value electronics package in the budget world, and nothing we say in the next 10 minutes changes that. But here's what the demos never mention, because a demo lasts 15 minutes and ownership lasts years. Every feature you just heard lives or dies with a thin chain of components. 2 batteries, a battery compartment, a circuit board, and an output jack that switches the whole system on the moment you plug in a cable. And that chain is where the real-world reports start. Part 2. The Problem. Let's sort the complaints from our comments and from the owner forums into 3 drawers, from mildest to most expensive. Drawer 1. The battery economics. An active bass drains its batteries whenever a cable is plugged in. Even if you are not playing, even if the volume is at zero, leave a cable in the jack overnight a few times and your fresh batteries are gone. Two 9-volt batteries cost real money every few months, and here is the beginner trap. When the batteries sag slowly, the bass does not simply stop. It starts sounding thin, distorted, weak, and a new player will blame their fingers, their amp, or their talent before they suspect the electronics. If you learned on a passive instrument, you have never had to think like this. Drawer 2. The design complaints. The battery compartment on several models is documented by owners as genuinely difficult to open, which turns a 30-second battery swap into a screwdriver operation, potentially in the dark, on a stage between songs. And the control layout got criticism in our own comments from a man who owns 4 Sires. Stacked knobs and a crowded layout means some adjustments genuinely need 2 hands, which is fine on a couch and terrible mid-song. Drawer 3, the expensive one, outright failure. A preamp that dies. Our commenter's story, a V7 preamp dead within a year, replaced by a V3 whose preamp also died, is not the average experience. And honesty requires saying that loudly. Millions of these instruments are out there, and most owners never see a failure. But the pattern exists in enough independent reports, on Talk Bass, on Reddit, in our comments, that pretending it is zero would be marketing, not reviewing. The honest framing is this. It is a lottery with good odds, the same as Sire's quality control lottery we covered last time. Most tickets win. But unlike sharp fret ends, which you notice in the first week while return windows are open, a preamp usually dies months or years in, long after returns and often outside warranty patience. That asymmetry is why it deserves its own video. And since almost nobody describes it, here is what a dying preamp actually sounds like, so you recognize it before it embarrasses you. Stage 1 is subtle. The bass loses a little sparkle, the highs sound dull, and boosting the treble seems to do less than it used to. Stage 2. The sound gets thin and slightly fuzzy, like a very cheap distortion pedal you never bought, especially on hard-plucked notes. Stage 3. Crackles, dropouts, or a volume that jumps when you wiggle the cable. And stage 4 is silence. Here is the test that costs nothing. The moment your Sire sounds strange, flip it to passive mode. If the bass suddenly sounds healthy again, your problem lives in the preamp or its batteries, not in your amp, not in your cable, and not in your hands. That one flip has saved more gigs and more repair bills than any other move an active bass owner can learn. And before the fan comments arrive, yes, there is a 4th drawer, and it is Sire's best defense. Most active Sire V models carry a small toggle switch that flips the bass into passive mode, bypassing the preamp entirely. Volume and tone keep working, the batteries become irrelevant, and the bass keeps making sound. It is the single most underrated feature on these instruments. It is the reason a dead preamp is an inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. And remember our 4 Sire owner from the intro. He uses exactly this switch, not as an emergency measure, but as his permanent sound. Hold that thought. Part 3, the passive escape. Because here is the plot twist this video has been building toward. The smartest answer to the preamp question might be inside Sire's own catalog. 3 current models ship with no preamp at all. No batteries, no circuit board, no failure mode. Just pickups, a volume knob, a tone knob, and wire. And you lose almost none of what makes a Sire, because the necks, the rolled fretboard edges, the fretwork, the build, all of it stays. Model 1, the V5. We said it 2 weeks ago, and the argument has only gotten stronger. The V5 might be the best pure value in the entire catalog. It is the classic jazz bass recipe, 2 single-coil pickups, the slim fast neck, all of Sire's build quality, with a fully passive circuit. Fewer components to pay for means more instrument per dollar, and a sound that has been the backbone of soul, funk, and pop records for 60 years. One of our commenters compared his V5 directly to a Mexican-built Fender and called it, and I am translating politely, at least its equal. That is a $400 bass being weighed against an $800 one. and holding. Model 2, and this is the king your comments crowned, the P5R. If you have never heard of it, that is precisely the point. The P5R has no viral demos, no famous reviews, and it kept appearing in our comment section like a secret handshake. The owner of 5 sires listed it first, and the 4-sire owner called it his go-to bass, the one he cannot put down. Here is what it actually is: a vintage-style precision bass, North American alder body, roasted maple neck, and that roasting is a real process, heat treatment that dries and stabilizes the wood the way decades of natural aging would. A rosewood fingerboard, a bone nut, and one fat vintage voice split pickup with passive volume and tone. That is the recipe of the instruments that built Motown and half of every record collection on earth, executed with Sire's modern factory precision at a fraction of what the famous version costs. The precision bass sound is the most recorded bass sound in history, and it needs no preamp, because engineers have been shaping it at the desk since before active electronics existed. If the V7 is Sire's crowd pleaser, the P5R is the one the owners quietly keep. And because we owe you the comparison, put the P5R next to the Fender Player Precision, the bass it is obviously aiming at. The Fender gives you the headstock, the resale value, and a dealer on every corner. The Sire gives you the roasted neck the Fender does not have at this price, the rolled edges, the bone nut, and change from the price difference that buys a proper setup, a strap, and a year of strings. Blind, through a band mix, separating them is a party trick very few players can perform. With eyes open, you are choosing between a badge and a specification sheet, and this channel will always tell you to buy the specification sheet unless the badge genuinely makes you play more. And Model 3, the U5, the short scale. 30-inch scale instead of 34, which means less reach, less weight, less fight. And we have praised short scales on this channel before for beginners, for guitarists switching to bass, and for anyone whose shoulders have opinions. The U5 is fully passive, with a P&J pickup pair, separate volumes, and a master tone. And owners report the tone control has a genuinely wide usable range for a passive circuit. It hangs light, it sounds warm and articulate, and there is simply nothing on it that can die between soundcheck and the last song. Now, the honest comparison, because a recommendation without trade-offs, is an advertisement. What do you actually give up going passive? Flexibility. The active V7 can chase 20 different sounds. A P5R makes essentially one sound, extremely well. If your gig demands funk slap in one song and dub lows in the next, the preamp earns its batteries, and this video changes nothing for you. Passive output is also a touch lower, so you will lean on your amp's gain a little more. That is the whole cost. What you get back: nothing to fail, nothing to feed, one less thing between your hands and the speaker, and a sound that decades of records have already proven. For a beginner, we would argue the passive route is not the compromise, it is the head start, because you learn what your fingers sound like before you learn what a mid-boost sounds like. Part 4. If you already own an active Sire, do not sell it, because the fix costs almost nothing. Step 1. Find the passive toggle right now tonight and practice flipping it with the bass on your knee in the dark, because on stage is the wrong place to search for a switch the size of a grain of rice. Know what your bass sounds like in passive mode and set your amp so that sound is usable. That is your parachute, and our commenter who gigs in passive mode full-time is proof the parachute flies. Step 2. The battery ritual. Unplug the cable every single time you put the bass down, no exceptions, and change both batteries on a schedule, twice a year on fixed dates, not when the bass starts sounding strange. Write the date on the battery with a marker like technicians do. Fresh batteries cost less than one drink. A dead preamp mid-set costs your nerves and possibly your reputation. And step 3, for the worst case, if the preamp does die outside warranty, you are not stuck. The V-Series is one of the most modded platforms in the bass world, and proven aftermarket preamps drop into that cavity. One of our own commenters swapped a respected aftermarket unit into his 9-year-old V7 and reports it plays on happily. That repair costs about $100 in parts if you solder, double that with a technician, And at the end, you own a genuinely upgraded instrument. A dead Sire preamp is an annoyance. It is not a funeral. Before we wrap up, run this through the 3 questions from the buyer's guide, because the framework matters more than any brand. Question 1. Can you hear the problem you are solving? If your active Sire works and you love the sound, this video is not an instruction to panic. It is an instruction to learn your passive switch. Question 2. Real fault or sold feeling? The preamp anxiety some forum threads sell is bigger than the real failure rate. The honest response is insurance, not fear. And question 3, have you done the cheap things first? Fresh batteries, on a schedule, solve the majority of what gets blamed on the circuit. Adults check the batteries before they blame the board. So here is the honest verdict. The Sire preamp is a genuine engineering achievement at the price, and it is also a lottery ticket with very good odds and a known worst case. If you want maximum sounds per dollar and you accept the battery ritual, buy the active one, learn the passive switch, and gig without fear. If you want maximum instrument per dollar with zero electronic anxiety, the passive V5 and the P5R are arguably the 2 smartest purchases in the entire Sire catalog. And the U5 is the friendliest doorway into bass this brand makes. The comments called it before we did. The quiet king of the lineup wears no batteries. Buy the bass your hands and ears can verify, not the one the demo needed a preamp to sell you. Tell me in the comments, has an active bass ever died on you at the worst possible moment? What was the bass, and what did you do mid-set? And to the P5R owners who started all of this. Was I fair to your king? If you disagree with anything in this video, the comment section is exactly where that belongs, because your ownership reports are worth more than every demo on this platform. Everything is linked in the description, including the buyer's guide with the complete map of gold mines and money traps. Subscribe for honest, no-hype truth about bass gear, and I would be genuinely glad to have you along for the ride. The preamp criticism did not go unanswered. Sire is a brand with a habit of quietly fixing what gets called out, without a press release, without fanfare. So a month later, we went back and checked, model by model, whether that pattern held up here too, and what was actually different on the units shipping now. Chapter 3. Sire fixed everything we criticized. Don't buy one yet. Over the last month, this channel asked why everyone is buying Sire. And then your comments exposed the preamp problem nobody reviews. And while we were filming all of that, Sire itself was quietly doing something remarkable. This year they announced the new Gen series, a refresh of the V3, the V7, the V7 Vintage, and the P7. And when you read the specification sheet next to our last 2 videos, it is almost eerie. We criticized the fret end lottery. The new Gen ships with stainless steel frets and a smoothed, edgeless neck. We criticized the weight lottery and neck dive. The new Gen ships with lighter hardware and aluminum tuners. Your comments criticized the electronics. Sire says the new Gen carries reworked electronics with clearer response and better consistency. It reads like they printed our comment section and worked through it line by line. So this should be the easiest recommendation in this channel's history. Buy the new one, right? And yet the honest answer today is not yet. There are 3 reasons to wait, and hiding behind those 3 reasons is the single best buying opportunity the budget bass market has seen in years. Stay with me, because the last part of this video is where the actual money is. Here is the plan. Part 1. What actually changed model by model, in plain language, separating real engineering from catalog poetry? Part 2. The 3 catches in the good news. And yes, there are always catches, including a number on the price tag that changes what this brand fundamentally is. Part 3. The opportunity. What the new Gen launch does to every second generation, Sire on the shelf and on the used market, and why patient buyers are about to be rewarded. And Part 4. The honest decision tree. Who should actually buy new Gen? Who should sprint to the outgoing generation? And who should simply keep the base they already own? A quick honest note before we start. Sire did not pay for this video. Nobody sent us anything. No early review units. And the links below are plain product links with no affiliate games. Everything in Part 1 comes from Sire's published specifications, and the first wave of owner reports, including one from our own comment section, and we will clearly say what is confirmed and what is still marketing. And because buying right is a method, not a list, the complete buyer's guide, every gold mine and money trap from this channel as one honest map is linked in the description. Now let's get into it. Part 1, what actually changed. Let's take it from the top of the catalog. The V7 New Gen gets the deepest rework, stainless steel frets, and that is a genuinely premium specification. Stainless frets outlast the nickel frets on instruments 3 times this price and stay smooth for decades, which directly attacks the sharp fret ends lottery we documented 2 videos ago. Luminlay position dots, the glow-in-the-dark markers you normally meet on boutique instruments. A small thing until you have played one dark stage. New neck and body profiles with what Sire calls the edgeless treatment, their rolled edges idea pushed further. Aluminum tuners, and this one matters more than it sounds. Tuning machines are the heaviest thing on a bass's headstock, and lighter tuners mean less neck dive and a lighter instrument overall, which directly attacks the weight lottery, catch number 2 from our list. Newly voiced Marcus Super J Revolution pickups, and a streamlined Heritage 3 preamp with push-pull active-passive switching. The V7 Vintage gets the same treatment, but keeps nickel frets for the traditional feel, and the P7 follows the same recipe. So far, this is the good news, and it is genuinely good. And 2 of those specifications deserve 30 seconds of honest physics, because they sound like catalog decoration and are not. Stainless steel frets first. Every time you bend a string or slide a note, the string files a microscopic groove into the fret underneath it. Nickel silver, the standard material on 99% of basses at every price, is soft enough that after some years of honest playing, the frets develop flat spots and grooves. And a professional fret dress to fix that costs more than $100 or several hundred when frets must be replaced. Stainless steel is so much harder that for a typical player, the frets simply outlive the question. It is also the reason some boutique builders charge extra for it. It is miserable material to work with at the factory, it eats tools, and Sire putting it on a production line at these prices is legitimately unusual. And the aluminum tuners? A bass hangs on your strap like a seesaw, and the headstock is the far end of the lever. Every gram out there counts triple, which is why a bass with heavy tuners dives toward the floor the moment you take your fretting hand off the neck, and why players fight it all night without knowing why their shoulder hurts. Swapping brass and steel tuning machines for aluminum removes exactly the weight that causes the dive. These are the 2 most honest upgrades on the sheet, and neither of them is audible in a demo, which tells you something about who this redesign is actually for. Owners, not viewers. Then there is the V3 New Gen, and here the story gets more complicated because the V3 did not just get upgrades, it got redesigned. The pickup switched from ceramic to Alnico magnets, which is the classic, warmer, more vintage-sounding choice, a real improvement on paper. The neck gets a tinted finish and the same comfort refinements, but the equalizer shrank. The old V3 carried a 3-band EQ with the famous mid-control. The new Gen V3 carries a 2-band EQ and a streamlined 4-knob layout. The mid-control, the single feature we called the reason budget Sires punch above their class, the knob that let a $300 bass imitate instruments far above it, is gone from the entry model. Sire would call that simplification, and for beginners overwhelmed by knobs, it honestly is. But it is also the first time in this brand's history that the new entry model does less than the old one. Remember that, because it connects directly to part 2. And one more piece of good news before the catches. This one from our own comments section rather than a spec sheet. A viewer told us he ordered a new Gen V7 from a retailer that lists actual instrument weights, picked the lightest one at 8 pounds 11 ounces, and reported it arrived set up perfectly and has already survived a string of gigs as his number 1. That is one data point, not a statistic. But it is exactly the kind of data point the second generation launch was missing in its first months, and it deserves to be on the record. Part 2, the 3 catches in the good news. Catch 1, the price, and this is the big one. The new Gen V3 lists at $499. Read that again. The V3, the bass we called the entry door, the bass whose entire argument was a real preamp at $300, now starts at essentially $500. The V7 Vintage with an ash body tops out at $999. The new gen range starts where the old mid-range used to sit and ends in four figures with tax. None of these are outrageous prices for what is on the spec sheet. Stainless frets and premium hardware cost real money to make. But step back and look at what happened. The brand whose superpower was being embarrassingly cheap is walking up market, one price bump at a time. The new Gen V3 at $500 is not competing with beginner basses anymore. It is competing with the used market, with mid-range Yamahas, with Mexican Fenders on sale. And that is a much harder fight than the one the old V3 was winning. And the trend line matters more than any single price tag. When the first Marcus Miller Sires landed around 2015, the pitch was almost scandalous. Features from the $1,000 shelf at $300. The second generation nudged prices up and the internet barely noticed because the value gap was still enormous. The new gen is the third step on the same staircase, and this time the entry ticket says $500. Every brand that ever won by being cheap has faced this exact temptation: win the reputation at the low price, then spend the reputation at a higher one. And history's not kind about it because the hungry competitor role Sire invented does not stay vacant. Harley Benton is already selling astonishing instruments at the old Sire prices. Yamaha and Ibanez never left the $300 shelf, and their quality control never needed a lottery metaphor. If Sire vacates the budget throne, someone sits on it within a year. That is not a prediction of doom. Premium Sire might be a wonderful business, but it is the honest context for that $499 sticker. You are watching a brand renegotiate its own founding promise in real time. Catch 2. The missing knob. As we said, the entry V3 lost its mid-control, so the cheapest ticket into the famous Sire flexibility now costs V7 money. If the sweepable mid was the reason you wanted a Sire, the entry door just got more expensive by definition, not by accident. And catch 3. The first run lottery. Every lesson from our last two videos applies double to a brand new production run. Reworked electronics means new circuit boards, new components, new assembly lines, and no track record. It might genuinely be more reliable. The spec language points that way. But nobody on earth can confirm it until thousands of these have lived through a year of gigs, sweat, and cable abuse. The second generation's reputation, good and bad, was earned over years of ownership reports. The new gen's reputation is currently a brochure. Our channel's standing rule for any redesigned product, basses, amps, pedals, anything: let the first production year find the problems for you, unless someone else is paying. Part 3. The opportunity. And here is where patient viewers get paid. When a manufacturer replaces a generation, 3 predictable things happen to the outgoing one, and all 3 are happening to the second generation Sires right now. First, retailers clear shelf space. Outgoing V3s, V5s, V7s start appearing with quiet discounts, bundle deals, open box offers, because dealers do not want last year's boxes next to this year's launch. Second, the used market floods. Early adopters who must have the newest thing sell their second-generation instruments to fund new-gen orders. And every extra listing pushes used prices down. And third, perception lags reality. The second-generation V7 did not get worse in March. It is the exact same instrument the entire internet spent 5 years praising, the bass from our first video, with all the catches we documented honestly, and all the strengths that made it famous. Only its price is falling. Now connect this to what we said about resale value in the first video. Soft resale is a catch when you are selling and a gift when you are buying. The bass that loses value fastest is the best bass to buy used, and an entire generation of Sires just started losing value on schedule. A used or clearance second-generation V7, with its proven track record, its known lottery odds, its documented fixes, at the prices we are about to see over the next months, is arguably a better purchase than it was at full price with full hype. And the passive second-generation models, the V5 and the P5R your comments crowned last time, are immune to the reworked electronics question entirely. because there is nothing in them to rework. That is the quiet gold mine of this whole launch. The new gen's job is to make the second generation cheap, and it is doing that job right now. So here's the practical hunting guide, because a gold mine you cannot find is just geology. Where to look? The open box and B-stock pages of the big retailers, which is where showroom and returned second generation stock quietly lands with full warranty at real discounts. Search listings for the words second gen, second generation, and the outgoing model names, because sellers desperate to signal old stock label it for you. Set save searches on the used platforms for V7 second generation and P5R, and let the alerts do the work. Prices there move weekly now, not yearly. What to expect? Modest discounts in the first weeks while dealers test the water, and the real numbers once new gen stock physically arrives on shelves and the old boxes are in the way. Patience literally converts to money here. What to check on arrival? Everything from our used base checklist, fret ends, neck relief, electronics through every knob position, and on active models both the battery compartment and the preamp in both modes, because a discount does not suspend the lottery, it just prices it honestly. And one warning while you hunt. As second generation prices fall, listings above the falling market will sit unsold, and their sellers will relist them with stories, mint condition, barely played, upgraded electronics. The checklist does not care about stories. Buy the instrument, not the paragraph. Part 4, the honest decision tree. Who should actually buy a new gen? 3 groups. Players who wanted a Sire but were scared off by our fret and weight videos, because stainless frets, edgeless necks, and lighter hardware attack exactly those lotteries. And if the specs deliver, the new gen is the safest Sire ever shipped. Working players who buy from retailers listing actual weights, like our commenter did, and treat the first run risk as a calculated bet with a warranty behind it. And players for whom the newest specification genuinely matters, stainless frets alone are worth real money if you play hours every day. Who should sprint to the second generation instead? Bargain hunters, obviously. The clearance and used wave is starting, and the instruments are proven. Beginners. A discounted second generation V3 with its full 3-band EQ and mid-control is now both cheaper and more capable than the new Gen V3. An almost absurd sentence that happens to be true. And everyone who watched our preamp video and decided to go passive anyway. The V5 and P5R do not care what generation year is printed in the catalog. And who should do nothing at all? Anyone who already owns a working Sire. Your bass did not get worse in March. The mid-control still sweeps, the neck still feels expensive, and the 3 questions still apply. Can you hear a problem? Is it a real fault or a sold feeling? And have you done the cheap things first? A new catalog page is a feeling, not a fault. So here is the honest verdict on the new gen. As engineering, it looks like the best Sire has ever built, and it addresses, almost line by line, the exact criticisms this channel and your comments raised. As a purchase today, it is an unproven first production run at prices that abandon the brand's own founding argument. Our recommendation is boring and honest. Let the first-year owners write the reliability record, watch the second generation get cheaper every month while they do, and make your move when the data exists. Either a proven base at a falling price, or a fixed base with a track record. Sire fixed almost everything we criticized. The most honest thing we can do is apply the same standards to the fix. Buy the base the evidence supports, not the launch video. Tell me in the comments, have you played a new gen yet? And if so, do the stainless frets and the lighter hardware feel like the fix Sire promises? Early reports in this comment section will genuinely help thousands of buyers, because right now, real ownership data is the rarest thing in this launch. And if you grab a clearance second generation deal in the coming weeks, post the price so everyone can see the gold mine opening in real time. Everything is linked in the description, including the buyer's guide with the complete map of gold mines and money traps. Subscribe for honest, no-hype truth about bass gear, and I would be genuinely glad to have you along for the ride. One more chapter on a completely different bass, a completely different flaw, and this time a company that fixed it fast enough to genuinely impress the reviewers who caught it first. Chapter 4. The Sire Z7 Pickup Problem and How Sire Quietly Fixed It. A few months ago, this channel asked why everyone is buying Sire, and your comments sent us straight into the preamp problem nobody reviews. Today it's a different Sire, a different flaw, and this time the story actually has a happy ending. The Sire Marcus Miller Z7 sells for under $800, promises Stingray humbucker punch at the bridge and jazz bass sweetness at the neck, and reviewer after reviewer opened the box and found the neck pickup quietly broken. Not broken in a scary way. Broken in a way almost nobody noticed until they went looking for it. Today, what was actually wrong, why it took two separate reviewers to figure out the real cause, the $80 fix one of them built before Sire did anything, and the fix Sire eventually shipped that makes this, as of right now, one of the few gear flaws on this channel with a genuinely happy ending. A quick honest note before we start. Nobody paid for this video, no brand, no shop, and every clip from other creators you are about to see is used muted for commentary with the channel credited on screen. The links below are plain product links, no affiliate games. And because buying right is a method, not a list, the complete buyer's guide, every goldmine and money trap from this channel as one honest map, is linked in the description. The first crack in the story came from a reviewer named Sonojono, who filmed his Z7 unboxing expecting to like it and ended up with a genuinely uncomfortable video. His neck pickup was loose in the cavity straight out of the box. He fixed it the only way he had on hand, wedging a piece of foam underneath to hold it in place, and kept filming, crossing his fingers it would hold for the review. It didn't. Partway through on camera, the neck pickup started cutting in and out, going quiet, coming back, going quiet again, until he stopped and said it plainly. The neck pickup was just acting wonky, and despite how much he liked the rest of the bass, he couldn't in good conscience call it fully fixed. His honest advice to anyone hitting the same problem: if you're not comfortable modding your own electronics, send it back for a different unit. At the time, that looked like a one-off quality control miss. A bad solder joint, a loose connector, bad luck on one bass off one production line. It's worth sitting with how uncomfortable that moment actually is for a reviewer. Most gear channels build their whole business on a good relationship with the brands they cover, free loaner units, early access, a standing invite to NAMM. Filming a pickup failing live, on camera, on a bass that brand almost certainly sent for free, is the kind of moment a lot of channels quietly edit around. Sonojono didn't cut it. He kept it in, named the problem plainly, and told his own audience to consider returning the bass rather than trusting his specific unit. That's the same honest review instinct this channel tries to run on, and it's exactly why his video is the one that started the whole chain that follows. Then a second reviewer, Low and Lobster, a channel that has put more hours into Sire basses than almost anyone on YouTube, went looking for a replacement pickup for his own Z7 and found something that changed the whole story. It wasn't one bad unit. He said it directly. The output imbalance between the neck and bridge pickups was something that persisted with every single Sire Z7. Here's the honest physics. The Z7's neck pickup is a completely normal single-coil jazz-style pickup, wound to completely normal jazz bass output. Nothing wrong with it in isolation. The problem sits 11 inches away, at the bridge, where Sire installed a hot Stingray-style humbucker. Pair a normal output single coil against a hot Stingray humbucker, and you don't get a quality defect, you get a fight the neck pickup was never built to win. Blend the two together, and in his words, the bass just sounds like a Stingray no matter where the blend knob sits, because the bridge pickup overpowers the neck pickup at every setting. That's not a bad solder joint. That's a design decision that didn't get tested against itself. Worth a 60-second detour into why this happens at all, because it explains half the pickup complaints on this channel's comment section. A pickup's output is mostly a function of two things: how many times the coil is wound, and what kind of magnet sits underneath it. A single coil jazz pickup, wound to a standard, moderate output, was never designed to be loud. It was designed to be clear, tight, and articulate, the classic jazz bass voice. A Stingray-style humbucker is a completely different animal. Two coils stacked to cancel hum, wound hot, built specifically to be aggressive and forward in the mix. Put a moderate output single coil 11 inches from an aggressive output humbucker on the same instrument, wire them to the same blend knob, and you've built a tug-of-war where one side brought a truck and the other side brought a bicycle. That's not a manufacturing defect anyone can solder their way out of. It's a spec sheet mismatch, and it's exactly the kind of thing that only shows up once real players, not a lab, start blending pickups on stage. Sire's first response when Low End Lobster asked about buying a replacement neck pickup for existing owners was simply no. No standalone part, no upgrade path, nothing for the players who already owned one. So he built the fix himself. Working with EMG, he spec'd a neck position pickup housed in EMG's 5-string jazz shell but wound using the guts of EMG's 4-string bridge design, then overwound 25% hotter than stock, specifically to survive next to that Stingray humbucker. EMG now sells it directly as the Z7 mod pickup in 4 and 5-string versions for around $100. Because it's an active EMG design, it's a drop-in swap with the existing wiring harness, no rewiring the whole cavity, no rerouting the body. The kind of mod a competent tech can do in one shop visit, not a project that eats your whole weekend. It is right now the single best fix for anyone holding an original Z7 who wants the imbalance gone without waiting on the manufacturer. One nuance worth flagging, if you watched this channel's earlier video on Sire's preamp problems, the Z7, like most Sire flagship models, runs an active onboard preamp with a passive bypass switch. Swapping in an active EMG pickup doesn't fight that circuit. EMG's whole product line is built to run happily inside an active system, but it does mean the fix and the preamp are two separate systems doing two separate jobs. Fixing the pickup imbalance won't touch a flaky preamp, and a healthy preamp won't fix an unbalanced pickup. If your Z7 has both problems at once, budget for both fixes. Don't assume solving one solves the other. And here's the part of this story that almost never happens in this industry. The manufacturer showed up anyway. In 2025, Sire quietly revised the Z7, a redesigned neck pickup, larger pole pieces, purpose-built to hold its own against the bridge humbucker, rolled into every current finish. Not a special order, not an upgrade fee, just the new standard spec. Low End Lobster tested it directly against the pickup he'd spent months designing around and called it the missing piece of the puzzle, praising Sire specifically for how fast they turned it around, and noting this wasn't a one-off. Sire has quietly revised the V10 Deluxe, the P10 Deluxe, the V8, the V6, and the P6 the same way, in direct response to reviewer feedback, without ever making a public announcement about any of it. Good brands fix things quietly. Bad brands deny things loudly. This is the first one. Worth being honest about the other side too, because not every review agrees. A reviewer named OKS Bassist picked up a pink Z7 5-string around the same period and never noticed the neck pickup problem at all, said his felt evenly balanced, and that if it was weak, it didn't matter much to him personally, since he mostly leans on the bridge pickup anyway. His complaints were completely different. Some fret buzz that needed a truss rod adjustment, and control knobs he found wobbly, and he handled both the honest way, through his dealer's return and setup process, rather than assuming the whole model was broken. That's the honest picture of a mass-produced budget instrument. Quality control varies unit to unit. Some players will never notice a flaw that ruins the review for someone else, and neither experience cancels the other out. What's true across every review, though, is the underlying design fact. A normal output jazz pickup next to a hot Stingray humbucker is a mismatch on paper, whether or not your ears happen to catch it. Two players, same model, same production run window. One calls it a deal breaker, and the other calls it a non-issue. And both of them are being honest. That's not a contradiction in the reviews. That's just what quality control on a budget instrument actually looks like up close. And it's exactly why this channel always tries to separate a flaw exists from a flaw will definitely ruin your specific bass. Zoom out for a second, because this isn't really a story about one pickup. Every budget tier bass brand runs the same gauntlet. Build fast, build cheap enough to hit the price point, and inevitably ship a batch of units with a flaw nobody caught in testing. What actually separates a brand worth trusting from one worth avoiding isn't whether a flaw happens, because on a base built to a price, eventually one always does. It's what the brand does in the 18 months after. Deny it publicly and keep shipping the same part, and you've told buyers everything they need to know about the next flaw too. Quietly fix it, roll the fix into standard production, and let independent reviewers be the ones who notice and report it, and you've told buyers something very different. Sire's pattern here, Z7 neck pickup, V10 Deluxe, P10 Deluxe, V8, V6, P6, all quietly revised after reviewer feedback, none of it announced with a press release, is closer to the second kind of brand than most players give a Chinese manufactured, direct-to-dealer budget line credit for. Here's the practical part. How do you actually tell, standing in a shop or scrolling a listing, whether the Z7 in front of you has the problem or the fix? 3 things to check, in order. First, the pole pieces on the neck pickup. The revised fixed version uses visibly larger pole pieces than the original. Line the neck pickup up against the bridge humbucker, and if the individual pole pieces look noticeably bigger and more prominent than a standard slim jazz pickup, you're likely looking at the new gen part. Second, just ask. A 5-second message to the dealer. Does this Z7 have the updated revised neck pickup? Gets you a straight answer faster than any visual check, and it puts the burden of knowing their own inventory exactly where it belongs. Third, if you already own one and neither of those tells you anything definitive, plug in and blend, sweep the blend knob from full bridge to full neck slowly on a clean amp setting, and listen for whether the tone actually changes character as you sweep, or whether it stays locked to Stingray the whole way across. If it barely moves, that's the imbalance talking. Run right into the questions coming up. So where does that leave a buyer today? 3 honest scenarios. If you already own an original Z7 and the imbalance bothers you, the EMG mod pickup is a real, tested, roughly $100 fix. No need to wait on anyone. If you're shopping for a Z7 right now, the fix already ships standard. Ask the dealer directly whether the unit has the revised, larger pole piece neck pickup, because both versions have been in the channel at different points, and only one of them has the problem solved. And if you already own one and honestly can't hear the imbalance like our pink C7 reviewer, you don't owe yourself an upgrade just because the internet found a flaw you never noticed. Play the bass you have. Fix the one that actually bothers you. 3 questions before we wrap up. Can you hear the problem on your own bass through your own amp, not because a video told you to listen for it? Do the blend knob sweep from earlier yourself before you spend $1 on a fix? A flaw you can't hear in your own rig isn't costing you anything, no matter how many reviewers found it on theirs. Is this a real fault or a sourcing lottery problem? Sonojono's loose pickup was a quality control miss on one unit, the kind that happens on any production line and gets solved by a return or a warranty claim. The output imbalance was a design issue on every unit, the kind that only gets solved by a redesign or a mod. Those are 2 different problems with 2 different fixes, and confusing them wastes money in the wrong direction. Whether that's returning a bass that just needed a solder touch-up, or trying to warranty claim a design decision the company already fixed going forward. And third, have you actually confirmed which version you're looking at before you buy? One line in a product listing or one message to a dealer separates a bass with a known, fixed flaw from one that still has it and takes less time than reading this sentence out loud. Here's the honest verdict. The Sire Z7 shipped with a real, documented design flaw, not a rumor, not a single grumpy comment, confirmed independently by multiple reviewers who don't always agree with each other. What makes this one worth telling isn't the flaw, it's what happened after. A community-built fix that beat the manufacturer to market, and a manufacturer that quietly, without fanfare, fixed it properly anyway, and kept doing the same thing across half their lineup. That's rarer than it should be in this industry, and it's worth rewarding with the same honesty this channel used to call the problem out in the first place. What was your experience with the Z7's neck pickup, old version or new? And if you've owned other Sire models that got quietly revised like this, tell us which one, because this channel wants to build the full list. Everything mentioned is linked in the description, including the buyer's guide with a complete map of gold mines and money traps. Subscribe for honest, no-hype truth about bass gear, and I'd be genuinely glad to have you along for the ride. So that's the full picture. 4 investigations, 1 brand, built entirely from independent reviewers, real owner comments, and receipts you can check yourself. Sire is not perfect, no budget brand is, but the pattern across every chapter here is the same one. Real flaws called out honestly, and a company that, more often than the rest of this industry, actually does something about it. If you've owned a Sire model this channel hasn't covered yet, tell us in the comments, because there's clearly more chapters left in this story. Everything mentioned across all 4 investigations is linked in the description, including the buyer's guide with the complete map of gold mines and money traps. Subscribe for honest, no-hype truth about bass gear, and thank you for sticking with this channel through the whole investigation.